Thank you for standing by and welcome to the Avecho Biotechnology Investor Webinar and Q&A today, discussing the company's upcoming phase 3 trial. All participants are in a listen-only mode. There will be an initial slide presentation lasting for approximately 25 minutes, followed by Q&A based on questions that are submitted live. If you do have a question that you'd like to submit, please feel free to type it in using the Q&A function within the Zoom app. On behalf of Avecho today, we have the CEO, Dr. Paul Gavin. I'll hand it over to him now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time today. My name is Dr. Paul Gavin. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Avecho Biotechnology. So for those of you that have, been following our journey over the last 3 years, you know that we've been developing this proprietary CBD soft gel capsule and driving it towards TGA registration initially in Australia. So the final piece of data that's really required in order to do that submission is a pivotal phase 3 clinical trial for the treatment of insomnia. Now, our planned trial, as you've sort of heard us talk about previously, is much larger and more rigorous than comparative studies conducted in the space, which did necessitate a significant capital raise this year. But now that that's out of the way, we can now turn our attention to the study, which is the key ticket item that I guess everyone's been waiting for. Our safe harbor statement. And so look, there's just 3 sort of things I want us to talk about today. The first is just closing off the capital raise and what the company would look like moving forward at the conclusion of the raise. The second is the phase 3 clinical trial and the associated timelines. And then lastly, I guess a bit of a discussion about the competitive landscape. There have been some further developments in the local CBD insomnia space over the last month, with the recent announcement that BOD had failed their primary endpoint in their large phase 2B study testing their product, their CBD product for insomnia. And I had a lot of shareholders ring me or email to me to ask about that trial. And so look, we'll discuss those results and the others in the space and the implications for Avecho's study. Should apologize, I've got a bit of a cough. So look, in April this year, we set out to raise $11 million to fund the study. We felt that an entitlement offer was the appropriate way to begin. In 2021, we'd done a small $5 million placement. We hadn't involved all the shareholders. Quite a number of you were rightfully unhappy. And so this time we thought for this opportunity, we really needed to open it up to shareholders to start. You guys could take what you wanted before we opened it up to new investors. And so in May, we announced that the entitlement offer had raised an initial $2 million from existing shareholders, which was great because this allowed us to kick off the initial manufacturing activities to support the phase 3 clinical trial, as well as registration batches, which I'll talk about a bit later. We then moved to allocate the remaining shortfall, which did legitimately take longer than anticipated. Nevertheless, we were able to announce that we'd received commitments for $6 million in August of this year. Now, our existing placement capacity allowed us to take 3.2 million of that straight away, whereas the remaining balance of about 2.8 million will go to the EGM on the 9th of November for shareholder approval. So I think you all would have received information about this last week. So please do make sure to get your votes in and support the resolutions so that we can jump into our phase 3 study. So the total raise this year, albeit over a longer period of time than anticipated, was about 8 million. Just to emphasize here on this total cash. So we don't have our third quarter figures out yet. So the 8.86 is not what we have in the bank. This is just the amount that's coming in this year over the course of the raise. Now, assuming shareholder approval of all EGM resolutions, the company will have about 3.17 billion shares on offer with a further 2.3 billion options at various exercise prices and expiry dates. Now, the raise was well supported by the majority of our major shareholders, and we welcomed a few new and important names to the top 10 in the register. So look, we thank everyone that participated and has given us a really good shot at this phase 3 trial. At the conclusion of the EGM, assuming everything goes above, everything gets voted in, the top 20 shareholders will hold about 44% of the company. Now, the key ticket item is that the 8 million that we've received over this year, it will not fund the entire phase 3 clinical trial that we've built. As I say, big, expensive trial, but it will drive us toward the initial key inflection point, which is the interim analysis, which we'll talk about during this conversation. But before jumping into the trial itself, we'll just reiterate a couple of slides here about the opportunity. So pharmaceutical cannabidiol, CBD, is extremely valuable. So there is currently only one FDA-approved pharmaceutical CBD product on the planet. That's Epidiolex. It was developed by GW Pharma, and it's approved for rare childhood epilepsy conditions. So it's an orphan drug. And so an orphan drug means that at any given time, this disease affects less than 200,000 Americans. And it allows you to have a fast track to FDA approval. So you get approval quicker, but once you're approved, there aren't actually that many patients to treat. Now, despite being probably rarely prescribed, GW Pharma was acquired for $7.2 billion US by Jazz Pharma in 2021. So Jazz Pharma is regular vanilla pharmaceutical company. They don't come from a cannabis background. They're one of many in the pharmaceutical space that are looking at registered cannabinoids as being particularly valuable. Now, obviously, if you build a product for an indication that's much bigger, you can have potentially have a product that's even more valuable. And so we're targeting a relatively large indication like insomnia for this pharmaceutical CBD product because we think it's a pretty compelling commercial opportunity. Now, insomnia is broadly defined as difficulty initiating or maintaining sleep. I don't need to tell any of you about it. You probably all have suffered for it with it at some stage or another. In Australia, 40% of us are getting less sleep than we need. 60% of us are experiencing these symptoms sort of 3 to 4 times a week, and only 20% of Australians report sleeping uninterrupted. And it costs the Australian economy about 19.1 billion. Now, we in Australia are a relatively small pharmaceutical market, but we're still spending 250 million per year on existing sleep medications that don't work as well as they could or have a range of unwanted side effects the next day. Globally, the insomnia market is worth more than 4 billion and it's growing quite rapidly. What is unique about Australia at the moment is this CBD opportunity. So pharmaceutical, biotech, we would never develop a pharmaceutical company, a product targeting Australia first. But what's happening here has made this too good to ignore. Now, essentially, our TGA is now allowing registered CBD products to be registered as over-the-counter medicines for indications like insomnia. And so what is an over-the-counter medicine? An over-the-counter medicine is one of the drugs that you don't have to go and see a doctor. You don't have to get a prescription. You walk into any pharmacy around the country, have a conversation with the pharmacist at the back, and they pull the drug out from behind the counter. That's essentially what this is. It's considered to be a huge commercial opportunity when compared to prescription medicines, because you have direct access to the entire Australian population. No one needs to see a GP, get a prescription. They just wander into their pharmacist. And Australians spend over $5 billion each year on OTC medicines. Now, this OTC piece in Australia is currently unique in the world. And the TGA has done this to try and drag unregistered medicinal cannabis into registered products. Now, no pharmaceutical CBD products are currently approved for sleep, but insomnia remains one of the most prevalent indications targeted globally by medicinal cannabis and consumer CBD products. And what I'm really presenting to you today is that we are really, really well placed to be one of the first to achieve OTC TGA registration with a CBD product and get the kind of first mover advantage. Now, when we designed our study, there was relative absence of good randomized placebo-controlled studies anywhere in the world that were testing CBD for insomnia. And so it becomes quite difficult to build a study where there's not historical evidence. And so we really did need expert scientific guidance to help build the study and make it as bulletproof as possible. And I'm not actually sure that I've shared this before, but these are the scientific advisors. We were very, very fortunate. We were able to attract the caliber of these 4 gentlemen. So Associate Professor Darren Mansfield, he's a Deputy Director of Monash Health in Melbourne. He's the Director of the Sleep Services as well. He's the principal investigator for our phase 3 trial. So he'll be the guy running the entire show. He's got significant experience in sleep disorders, including insomnia, and significant experience in large insomnia clinical trials. Now, Professor Shantha Rajaratnam is the Deputy Director of the Turner Institute for Brain and Mental Health. He's the Head of Psychological Sciences. He's an expert in sleep-wake cycles and insomnia. He's the chair of the Sleep Health Foundation, and you might have seen him in the last couple of weeks. He's been everywhere in the media talking up Sleep Week. Shantha is a global key opinion leader in sleep, and coincidentally was also a demonstrator for me 25 years ago at Monash. Michael Perlis is a US expert in insomnia as well. If you Google him, you'll see the kind of CV that Michael has. He's at Pennsylvania Uni, one of the biggest sleep programs in the United States. He's a rock star pretty much in the insomnia world. He's written books, he's developed protocols, he's chaired all the sleep committees and journals, and we are very, very fortunate to have Michael involved. And last but not least, Professor Sean Drummond. He's Professor of Clinical Neuroscience at Monash. He's the Director of the Sleep and Circadian unit over there, and is a specialist in the measurement of insomnia. So these four guys have been instrumental in building the phase 3 program that we have, that we pretty comfortable will capture any effect of CBD. And so this is what the trial looks like. I've put summaries of this slide up before, but there's a bit more detail here. This trial design is based upon successful phase 3 clinical trial designs that were used for to get the last 2 insomnia drugs approved with the FDA. So that's Dayvigo and Quviviq. So actually, I don't know if you can see my cursor. So it starts with a screening and recruitment period. So subjects that are eligible are subjected to a subsequent 2-week compliance check. This is a really important stage. So essentially what we're going to do here is all the patients are going to do all their sleep diaries. So every single morning they wake up, they record a sleep diary. They've got questionnaires that they do every fortnight, these validated sort of FDA, TGA questionnaires around sleep. And we are going to make sure that they are filling these out as meticulously as they should. If they don't fill these out as they should, we're going to kick them off the study. So it's a compliance check for that. Secondly, as well, it's actually a check to make sure that their sleep is as impaired as we need it to be. Quite often people think they're sleeping much worse than they actually are. During this 2 weeks, if it turns out that their insomnia isn't quite as bad as they thought it was, we will kick them off the study. So essentially, we're going to enrich the population before we've started with a whole bunch of patients that we know are going to have good compliance to the study protocol, and we know have sleep that's impaired as we need it to be to get a good result. Now, subjects that remain eligible then get randomized to these 3 treatment groups. So the first is obviously placebo. So there's no CBD, it's just a sham medicine, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. And then we have a 75 milligram dose of CBD, which is a single capsule, and 150 milligram dose, which is 2 capsules. So 150 milligrams is the highest dose that you can go to and still qualify as for this TGA over-the-counter medicine. Remembering as well that our 150 milligrams and our 75 milligrams will behave as a much higher dose because of our increased absorption. Now, subjects will remain on the study for 8 weeks. So say sleep diary every single day, sleep questionnaires and other analysis every 2 weeks. Now, the trial will be taking place across 5 clinical trial sites in the country. So we've got 1 in Melbourne, we've got 2 in New South Wales, so Western Sydney and Central Coast. We've got Brisbane and we've got Perth. So we've got the major population catchments that we think we need for the trial. If we had received more money in the capital raise, we would have opened more sites that we could recruit patients much faster. But as it is, this is what we've got to work with, and it's going to be pretty good. Now, the study is large. So it's 519 in total, so 173 per group. Again, this number was derived from looking at the effect size in previous insomnia studies with their particular drugs and the influence of the placebo effect. And our statisticians are comfortable that this is a pretty good number to maximize the chance of seeing statistical significance. We'll talk a bit more about that a bit later as well. This last piece is an interim statistical analysis. Now, we've inserted an interim analysis into our study as a real key feature, and it's really a requirement from our perspective, given the absence of previous randomized placebo-controlled studies. Normally, what you would do is, in the past, someone else has tested CBD in a randomized placebo-controlled study, and you'd pull that study, have a read, and say, you know, CBD does this, the effect size is this, the variation is this. Based on all that, we need X number of patients. Given that doesn't exist, an interim analysis allows you to calculate that as you go. So essentially what will happen is that at a midpoint through our study, the statisticians will look at the sleep improvement across the three groups. So they won't know what the groups are, but they'll look at the difference between the three groups. Now, in the case where there's no difference between the three groups, that's essentially a futility assessment. The statisticians will say, despite your best efforts and how good your product is, CBD just doesn't work for insomnia because there's no difference between the three groups. And in that case, we can the study early and we save all the cash that we would have spent on the remainder. What we think will happen is the statistician will say, there's a difference of X between the groups. And based on this difference of X, you are going to need an additional 100, 200, 50, 300, whatever it is, patients to maximize the chance of getting statistical significance and getting a successful phase 3 trial, which is all what we're after. So it's essentially a cheat code mid-study that allows you to adjust on the fly to make sure you get your statistical significance at the end. Because if you don't get significance in your primary endpoint, you don't really have anything to submit to a regulatory authority. Now, initially, we were thinking we would have to hit about 300 patients before our interim analysis, but the recent data announced by BOD, which again we'll talk about in a sec, gave our statisticians comfort that we could really probably do an interim analysis after 210 patients, which is actually more patients than they dosed on their study. And so this is where the timelines sit. So as we mentioned at the start, the 8 million doesn't fund 519 patients. With that in mind, the really key target to get to is the interim analysis. So success in this interim analysis, especially in light of the recent failures in the space, will mean additional capital to complete the study will not be difficult to find, and it will more than likely be non-dilutionary, and it will more than likely come from a pharmaceutical partner. Now, in June, we received the first 2 million from the entitlement offer, and we kicked off the manufacturing activities. So, over here, these include all the GMP activities required to commence manufacturing and registration batches. So registration batches are a key requirement for all future regulatory submissions, whether that's FDA, TGA, EMEA. And you probably hear people talk about it a bit. Essentially, registration batches prove not only that your product is stable and can have a 2-year shelf life, but that you can manufacture it reproducibly. If you can't manufacture it reproducibly, it's not a product. So what you have to do for registration batches is 3 completely separate, independent manufacturing campaigns. And you have to prove that those 3 independent batches are exactly the same. And that validates the manufacturing process. And then you put them all on stability and you prove that they're all stable. And that activity is the key piece of the chemistry section of your FDA and TGA submission dossier. So key activity that we've already ticked off. Now, we've already done 2-year stability on the first batches of our products, so we're comfortable it's good, but we still need to formally do these 3 registration batches. The clinical supply, we are thinking it probably arrives in Australia in November, or maybe early December, and that allows us to repackage it into the specific doses that get given out to patients to potentially, hopefully, allow dosing kind of late January. Now that we got the additional money as part of the shortfall placement, we've pushed the button on this next activity, which is completely non-exciting from a shareholder perspective. It doesn't sound sexy. It's the database build, but it's critical. So this is essentially the entire IT infrastructure that captures data from patients, proves the data has not been manipulated and is kosher. And if you don't have it done properly, then you can't submit anything to the FDA or the TGA. So that, again, big ticket item, quite expensive. that'll take till early Jan to complete. And essentially, we're thinking that late January at this stage is where we start recruiting and dosing our patients. Now, the way we are managing the spend, we think we're going to hit the interim analysis towards September, October. Now, the rate of recruitment, as well as the number of people that we kick off the study during that compliance check, will ultimately determine whether we get to that interim analysis earlier than that or later than that. We truly won't know until we start recruitment what that balance kind of looks like, but we'll be able to update everyone once we start. And as sort of mentioned earlier, this interim analysis is a huge go, no-go point. If the analysis suggests that there's no signal for CBD working, we'll close the study down. But if we assume the interim analysis looks good, we will obviously continue to dose the remaining subjects. Now, this last line here, we have been in licensing discussions for this product for a while, and we've had a few early offers for the product, but the offers were not what we were prepared to accept. It's fair to say that the pharmaceutical companies, the larger pharmaceutical companies, have all been very interested to wait for our phase 3 clinical trial results. With the failures in the space, we thought at the end of our phase 3 we'd be the subject of quite an attractive bidding war. With the failures in the space, some of those discussions have maybe moved to, well, maybe the bidding war starts around the interim analysis, because if it's looking good there, the assumption will be that the trial's heading towards success. Now, based on what we're hearing, maybe the discussions maybe we'll be able to consummate something earlier, but we're not going to accept a deal unless it's very attractive for the company and shareholders, and it's the right one. Now, I'm just going to start talking about, I guess, the competitive landscape a bit, and specifically as well, the danger of the placebo response. So I didn't really talk about the placebo response that much in the previous slide, but it is one of the key risks to all of these studies. Unfortunately, I mean, we were on record last year talking about this. And so a placebo effect is essentially when patient reports improvement in their condition after taking a pretend medication. So in our study, they won't be getting CBD, but they'll still be reporting on their sleep. And 100% patients not taking CBD, the placebo effect will drive a bit of improvement in their sleep quality. Now, this is particularly true of trials with subjective endpoints, where you're basically asking patients how they feel. It's a leading question that causes the placebo effect. Now, as I say, we went on record last year saying that everyone had to watch out because this was a real risk for these CBD studies. And Q1 this year, that actually eventuated. And the first two big guys who had rolled out early phase 3 clinical trials announced that they had failed. And so this was both Can and Ecofiber. So they both had their own CBD products. They were both doing flavors of insomnia, so sleep disturbance or insomnia. Both of them failed their primary endpoint. Both of them came out to announce that the reason they failed their primary endpoint was that sleep improved with the placebo and they couldn't see any difference. Now, the reason for showing a slide like this is not to gloat and dance around on other people's failure. In all honesty, everyone jumping into phase 3 trials here needs to be applauded because it's a high-risk endeavor. But this is really to, in light of the previous slide, just convey that A, this is a danger, and these results proved it was a danger, and B, we knew about it before this happened. And because we knew about it before it happened, we proactively were able to design elements into our study to limit the damage that this placebo effect could do. I haven't spoken about what they are because that kind of undermines the purpose of doing it in the first place. We don't want our patients on our study knowing what the items are, but we have included big ticket items in our study to minimize the damage of the placebo effect. And now, I guess, to the recent results were announced about a month ago by VOD. And so there were 4 of us in the race. It's not really a race. There were 4 of us looking at CBD for insomnia initially, Can, Ecofiber, VOD, and us. We spent a long time devising our phase 3 clinical trial. And in the interim, the other 3 guys all started theirs. Now, BOD tested two CBD doses, 50 milligrams and 100 milligrams, against placebo in 208 patients over 8 weeks. Now, as I say, on the 6th of September, they announced that they failed their primary endpoint. So they didn't overall see an improvement in insomnia versus placebo with CBD in their intent to treat population, which is essentially everyone on your study. However, when they had a closer look at their data, they found a couple of very important insights. Now, the first being that when they analyzed a smaller cohort of subjects, so that's the per protocol population, that's everyone that did exactly what you wanted on the study, they found statistical significance for their 100 milligram dose versus placebo, but they didn't see any improvement with their sleep with their 50 milligram. So what does that tell us? Firstly, it confirms that CBD can work for insomnia in a dose-dependent fashion. So it didn't work at 50, but it worked at 100. So increasing the dose matters. Our trial is going up higher. So we're going up to 150 milligrams. So BOD only went to 100. We're going to 150. And this is before you factor in that our product has increased absorption. So our 150 milligram dose will act as a much higher dose. So if BOD's results hold true and they show that dose response matters, then our trial has a much higher dose to get better efficacy and make it more certain that we'll get a good result. The second thing is they highlighted, the fundamental hypothesis of trials is statistical power. To achieve greater statistical power, you need more patients. The fact that they saw statistical significance in this post hoc analysis, but not in their primary endpoint, suggests that they didn't have enough patients on study. So they only had 208, we have 519. We've nearly got as many per group as they had in their total study. So our study overcomes both the limitations. Now, the other things that we have on top of that is we've got these higher inclusion scores. So we have more severe insomniacs on our study. So we've got a greater dynamic range to see a change. We've got these big ticket items to reduce the placebo effect, which they didn't have. And we've got an interim analysis to adjust to the exact number of patients we need during the study, which they didn't have either. So the results of their study really have de-risked our study. I mean, they should 100% be congratulated for contributing to the collective knowledge base of those of us trying to, get CBD registered. We were not happy when they failed, but what they have shown is very exciting for us. And so just lastly, I guess, the market and media had always sort of positioned this CBD opportunity as a race to registration. And it was really always made to sound like the winner would get all the spoils and there will be nothing for everyone else. That's never really been true because there has always been a large surplus of potential licensees for a relative deficit of products. Even if all 4 of us had succeeded, we're talking to way more than 4 people that want this product. So there was always going to be licensing opportunities. But it is true that if you're the first, you will obviously get a large commercial upside because you can start a bit of competitive tension and get a bit of a bidding war. Now, there were 4 of us that started chasing this initial TGA registration, and now we are the last one standing. There are 100% further companies that have ethics approval and will also begin down this path, but they are a way behind. And if the results of our peers teach them anything, it's that you need a fair degree of drug development expertise and product development experience if you are going to get this product and these trials to work in proper pharmaceutical quality clinical trials. So the failures in this space have not warned us off proceeding at all. Every one of these failures and the way they have failed have validated every single thing that we have said in the public domain and every choice that we have made with our technology and our product and our clinical trial design over the last 3 years. We are now uniquely placed to be one of the first, if not the first, if not the only CBD product approved with the TGA for insomnia, which, as you can all imagine, will be a great win for all of us. We had told the market last year this was a distinct opportunity, but now that it has occurred, it's really now all on us and our phase 3 clinical trial to deliver. And now that it's actually this close, we're all very, very excited to get started. So we will keep everyone updated as we move into and through the study. There's obviously other news items and other programs that in and of themselves are big ticket items. But for this presentation, we really did want to focus on the phase 3 program. So if you do have any questions, I mean, obviously answer them now, but you're also free to post them via our Investor Hub platform. And also, if you are a potential candidate for participating in the phase 3 clinical trial, you can pre-register interest via the link here. So thank you for your time, and yeah, look forward to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Paul. As you mentioned, we'll get on to the Q&A part of the webinar today. As a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question you want to submit, please do it using the Q&A function within the Zoom app, and we'll get to them shortly. First question I've got, Paul, is obviously the focus here is around the phase 3 clinical trial that you've spoken to today, but with the interim analysis in approximately 12 months, what other news flow can investors expect from the company?
Yeah, so yeah, as I said, this was very focused on phase 3, but there is a whole lot of other things happening in parallel that we also consider will be of interest. So there are further clinical trials happening with our products. So this CBD capsule has just finished dosing, I think, in one of the clinical trials at the Lambert Initiative, and it's about to start dosing in a second. So, assuming those trials are favorable, there'll be a bit of news to talk about. There are further clinical trials we're hoping to submit to ethics shortly. Our topical CBD osteoarthritis phase 2 program, again, that we're doing with the Lambert Initiative in Sydney, that's also going to incorporate topical CBG. So that'll be a whole nother phase 2 program, clinical trial program to talk about. Our partners in the US on the non-cannabis side, so Perrigo, still working towards their phase 2 pain study using our topical ibuprofen for US registration. So that'll actually be really exciting because there's no topical ibuprofen approved in the US yet, and they'll drive it forward to that registration. And the Arthur Group continues to develop oncology drugs using our TPM. So we'll update everyone as we get updates ourselves from there. And then I guess there's the potential opportunities for all these cannabis products in the other markets. So yeah, we hope to consummate some licensing agreements for some of these in the unregistered medicinal cannabis space. I'm off to the US on Monday for a couple of weeks. I've got a whole lot of meetings with US recreational cannabis companies, as well as some pharma companies over there that are interested in our gummies. So cannabinoid gummies enhanced with our TPM. So hopefully there's news around licensing and commercialization of some of those as well. So we're going to be flat out. I mean, you'll all be waiting for the phase 3 trial results, as will we, but we think there's going to be a whole lot of additional value in a whole lot of supplementary programs along the way.
Thanks, Paul. The next question I've got from the audience is, why is the testament phase 8 weeks? Will you look at sleep quality at the start and the end? And then is the primary endpoint about the whole 8 weeks?
Yes. So we obviously look at sleep quality at the start. That's part of the inclusion criteria. So very, very specifically in that compliance check, we need to confirm that patients are exactly the kind of insomniacs that we need, but 100% as well, that compliance check forms the baseline. So, whatever their sleep score that comes out of that forms the baseline for all the subsequent assessment. The primary endpoint is an 8-week endpoint. So at 8 weeks, we will be comparing the change in insomnia severity index, so that's a questionnaire, and sleep efficiency. So we have 2 co-primaries versus what the patients were from baseline, and obviously need a statistically significant improvement over placebo. We do obviously have an exhaustive range of secondaries. So looking at the 4-week time point, as well as a whole lot of secondary endpoints related to anxiety and various flavors of quality of life.
Thank you. The next question is, will it be possible to salvage anything of potential commercial value in the event that the primary endpoint isn't met, but multiple secondary endpoints are?
Yes, definitely. So depends on the secondary, as an example. So as I just said, like a lot of our we've got a bunch of secondaries around anxiety. So this study, the way we built it, is exactly as you would design an anxiety study. We could swap our primary and secondary endpoints for sleep and anxiety and the associated questionnaires, and the dosing regime and everything wouldn't change. So in one scenario, we prove that CBD doesn't work for sleep, but we end up with a really compelling large cohort of patients showing that it works for anxiety. In that scenario, this trial will be very valuable to a pharmaceutical licensee that wants to chase the product for anxiety. Likewise, sleep as well. Big pharma who are used to much longer development programs than this. Everyone has to understand, all of us are being quite aggressive the way we're approaching the TGA. Big pharma would ordinarily be used to many more clinical trials. So long as this study demonstrates an effect that's understandable and looks to be real, even if it doesn't necessarily get its primary endpoint, there's 100% licensing opportunities with large pharmaceutical companies who can do subsequent larger studies to get it moving forward.
Thank you. The next question is there anything similar happening in this regard in other territories?
As far as the OTC opportunity, not currently. So this product, if I was to submit this product to the FDA tomorrow, it would be a prescription medicine. It wouldn't be an approved pharmaceutical OTC medicine. New Zealand have looked at this, but they actually knocked it back, but we think they'll look at it again. Other countries will start looking at this and taking it more seriously. Where this is a huge opportunity is the TGA did this because the TGA hates medicinal cannabis, and they hate that you can sell product without proving it works and proving it's safe through the special access scheme. This is meant to be a huge incentive to do proper pharmaceutical development, prove something works, prove it's safe, proves the dosing, all the rest. Because the TGA has done that, Big Pharma in their cannabis units has made their Asia Pac scouts the kind of eyes of their future cannabis licensing decisions, because this is now where a lot of phase 3 clinical trials are happening. Once we start getting success in these trials, it will go into the other territories and you'll see these springing up everywhere. But at the moment, it's an Australian opportunity that's unique and needs to be taken advantage of.
I don't have any further questions, so I'll just throw it back to you to provide a closing comment.
No, appreciate your time. I guess shareholders and everyone in the market, it's been a long time coming, getting towards a phase 3 trial. Everything seems to unfold for us on this product. The TGA guidance for this OTC thing was like it was written for us. Increased absorption adds value, pharmaceutical development expertise adds value. And now we're at the pointy end, and so it's going to be a very, very exciting next year. And if we are successful where everyone else has failed, I think everyone will see the rewards, especially given where the market cap is starting off from right now. There aren't many phase 3 clinical trial companies that are valued at $10 million. So we would expect a significant re-rate. So I thank everyone for their support. And please just keep your eyes on us as over the next 6, 12, 9 months.
Thanks, Paul. Once again, as you said earlier, any questions from anyone else that you might think of later, please put them on the Investor Hub. There'll be a replay of this session available at the same link shortly after this concludes, if you missed the start or anything. But once again, thanks to everyone for joining, and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.